Using laptops? Are we really doing that? As we thought about this, it's obviously more than just a device. It's a catalyst for change, especially in media and content, and the way we consume it, and the way we think as people, and in terms of everything we do in our daily lives. But when they first asked me to talk about tablets, especially in a Keynote context, I thought, everything's been said. And not only has it all been said, it was said in 2010 before the iPad hit the shelves. All of these were essays in Wired magazine from major minds in technology thinking about how the tablet was going to affect our lives. And I'm not going to go through all of them, but I tried to paraphrase each of their essays down to one line. And there are a few here that I thought were particularly compelling to think about and to kind of kick this off. I'm not going to go into each one in detail, but a window that exposes us to infinite layers. It's sort of our window to the digital world while we're traversing the physical world. And I think that's through augmented reality, it's through extended experiences, it's through supplemental content that we're seeing on these devices, in regards to television and other mediums. A book is now a place where people congregate. And that really, again, this was before tablets came out when people were thinking about these things. And that really speaks to the social nature of what this can layer onto content, even with something as old and ancient as reading a book. The $100 tablet is achievable for the third world. There's no moving parts in tablets. Eventually they can make them with as cheap of materials as possible. And the $100 laptop dream is really more realistic on a tablet device. And that's important for its third world implications, but also its first world implications in terms of distribution and scale once these devices get cheaper. Humanism, coming back to machines, I'm going to talk a little bit about the natural human interface. You've probably heard a lot about it, but try to put some perspective and context around that. And content as an event, from Chris Anderson of Wired. Really, when content arrives or becomes available on the tablet, that's an event in time that you look forward to, almost like the premiere of a movie or a TV show. So what is it about this screen? I mean, it's only 3 inches, give or take, bigger than a phone, smaller than a laptop. I don't think 3 inches has meant so much to anything besides football and sex as it does on this device. But what is it? Why is those 3 inches make it such a big difference? Because the reality is, everything you can do on a tablet, you can technically do on a mobile phone or on a computer. But the fact that it's packaged in this way is what makes all the difference and is what is caused why we're here today in terms of a revolution. The difference is really design and interface and user experience. And it's something we can hold in our hands. It's tactile. We can hold it close to us and interact with it in an intimate way, or put it down and lean back and let content come to us. The touch and the natural user interface, which I think is really important in terms of how this is changing the way we interact with technology and media. The app you're seeing on this device here is Planetary, and I thought this really shows an early inkling of how the natural interface is going to change the way we interact. What Planetary does is it takes your entire music library and it reorganizes it into a solar system. And when you think about using touch and manipulating devices in a natural way, scrolling and searching and sorting is not as natural as using your hands to tactily guide yourself through a solar system that's organized by genre and by artist and around planetary systems. And it's really taking more advantage of the way that we naturally interact with the physical world in a digital context. And touch manipulation is an ancient behavior, but and that's why it's so intuitive for people of all ages. But what's happening here is the technology is finally conforming to us instead of us conforming to the technology. A keyboard and a mouse is really us trying to figure out how do we talk to computers, how do we communicate with computers. But we're moving towards a world where the technology is figuring out how do I communicate with people. When we talk to each other, we use thousands of facial muscles, our eyes, our mouths, the tone of our voice, and natural language. And we're moving closer and closer to that in the computing space, and I think the tablet is really a huge leap forward, but it's still only a small leap. We're still just pinching and sliding and poking. I mean, there's so much more that we can do as this evolves and as the cameras see us and as Siri-type technology goes into every bit of technology that we see out there. I always say, it's been less than 2 years, and we're excitedly waiting for what iterations the iPad 3 is going to have. But it occurred to me that if you're 30 years old, you probably will live, if you judge your life by Apple product launch cycles, you'll probably live to see the iPad 53. And it kind of gives you some perspective of how fast and exponential this change is going to be. So these things aren't that unrealistic or science fiction. I put culminates in the singularity on here because everyone in my office was made fun of me for putting the singularity in this presentation. I'm not sure everyone knows what that is, but it's a point in time where human biology is so intermeshed with technology that there's really no difference. And you see this as sort of the early movements towards that. But all of this change in the technology and the way we interact with it is really killing some old computing paradigms. One of the things that we've talked a lot about and was also featured in Wired is about the web being dead. And essentially that means the traditional browser, as we've thought about it, is a vestige of the past. Browsers are still heavily used on tablets, maybe the most heavily used thing, but I think that's going to change. That can't go on. It's not the natural use of this device to browse the web in its traditional form. So those old computing legacies won't survive, just like files and folders won't survive. The website as we know it is going to change. It's in as much peril. The website isn't as much peril as the magazine in terms of how you think of a website as a one-dimensional sheet of paper with a bunch of content dumped on it and a bunch of links. This has got to be a deeper, interactive, app-like experience. That's really the promise of HTML5 in terms of all those apps being cloud-based and following us to whatever screen we go to, similar to what you saw in the Corning video that Steve showed. So apps will dominate. There's some things that are band-aids now to changing the web into this. There's a company called OnSwipe that uses an algorithm to basically transform any website into a tablet-optimized experience. And then that starts to change the way we think about advertising on websites, not just traditional banners along the side, but full-page, deep, more immersive, richly creative experiences. So as we start to interact with machines in a way that's more natural to us, we start seeing people spending more time. So when they're spending more time, it's sort of the reversing of the ADD trend, of the multitasking trend, of having a million tabs open and a million programs running along the bottom of your computer. You tend to be doing one thing at a time on a tablet. And as that longer form content starts coming back, there starts to be a different kind of storytelling that's possible on a tablet. This game here, that Heavy Rain, it's not actually a tablet game, it's a console game, but I think it's really indicative of where storytelling might go on these devices, which is Heavy Rain is an adult, animated, dark feature film, but it's played on a console game where you make moral decisions for your characters that affect where the story goes and the content that you see. And you start thinking about this in books, in TV, in movies, in magazines, and it starts thinking of the reader or the consumer as part of the story and affecting what you see in the story. And that is really natural on a tablet device. Not to say that old models are necessarily going away of content consumption, but we start to think about new ways to talk to people and tell stories. So gaming is leading the way in sort of that kind of storytelling. But again, one purpose at a time means that from an advertising perspective, the way we look at it is, we have people's attention finally in an uncluttered environment if we advertise correctly within the tablet space, within apps, within media partners who are engaging people in deeper, more long-form ways. So long-form is a glimmer of hope for the magazine industry. I think you'll hear from the publishing industry later today, but this becomes a big opportunity for magazines to be more than just what they are, to be more than just a collection of stories, to really be networks and ecosystems of content from the magazine articles themselves to long-form ebooks to gadget guides to novelettes. I mean, it just goes on and on to access the conferences. And the magazines really become networks and dynamic media companies. And they have to think about their editors as segment producers, not just writing an article. However, and so when you start moving from a subscription to a membership concept with magazines, you start thinking about not so much circulation, but average revenue per user, and it changes their business model quite a bit. Because what really upsell and value can the magazine publishers give to their readers beyond just increasing their circulation numbers? And one thing to say about the traditional magazine experience is that I still think this will survive. A magazine article is not a single. It doesn't necessarily live on its own in every context. They're really a collection of stories that tell a bigger story. So there's still some reason to have the traditional magazine exist in terms of the way it comes out on a monthly basis. So the magazines are just one source. Tablets aggregate pretty much every source you can imagine. In many ways, still to this day, TV is a one-source horse. I like the rhyme. Where it's all the different content channels, but through one provider, through a cable provider. Smart TVs are changing that a little bit, but on tablets we have direct from the TV providers, direct from the pay cable, direct from the networks. We don't only have iBooks, we have Kindle, we have Barnes & Noble apps. We have the ability to pull in every piece of content that we could possibly want, and it's now a direct business relationship between consumers and content companies. Not to say that the tablet is, as we said earlier, it is an amazing opportunity to enhance traditional television, to say how can we reach people in deeper ways while they're watching traditional television as a content company or as an advertiser. But it also is part of a bigger trend where on-demand content that we're getting directly from the content providers is actually more disruptive than the DVR is in terms of time shifting. And once we can subscribe to a network versus just getting it all pumped into through a giant fire hose. One problem here for us in the advertising community is when you subscribe to content directly from a content provider, there's usually no advertising. So in the future, when you're in business directly with a network, we have to think about what those models of advertising are going to be. Is there going to be ways to subsidize that cost for users? So there's still the ability to put advertising in there. So I thought, as I wrap this up, I was kind of in the sort of future esoteric space. I better talk about what's actually for sale now, since I come from a media agency. And where can we advertise? Games, magazines, TV, video, information, utility, social apps, pretty much everywhere that's available now. Some things are ready for prime time, some are not. Some don't have the scale. Sometimes the creative production costs are too high for the amount of people you're going to reach. What can you do there? Rich media ads, static page ads, iAds, banners, expandable, branded apps. All the traditional ad units are there. They're on tablets. You can buy them. The question that you have to ask yourself is why and when and what should I do differently on this device and how. You know, there's within those ad units you can have games, you can have saving content and sharing, you can have commerce, you can have location and exploration and interactivity. That's all there. So there's a lot to think about in terms of just what's available today versus where these trends are taking us tomorrow. So with that, I think I'm ready for questions, but qualified ones. Okay. All right.
John, could you explore more this idea of the ways in which tablets could change the web and more appified experiences as opposed to the web browser experience? What the key limitations of the web browsing experiences have been, and then some of the key ways you think apps, or a sort of a more app approach is going to transform that?
Yeah, definitely. I think you know, one of the interesting implications of that is what's going to happen to search. I mean, we don't find restaurants anymore on our mobile phones by going and searching for them. We go to Yelp or OpenTable or those apps, and the same thing with certain shopping experience. There's still blue sky things that we don't know where to start when we research for them, but when the web is completely organized into unique niches, into apps, that changes the way we find and discover and share information. Secondly, you know, with things like Flipboard, and Steve, you mentioned this before, we made a deal early on with Flipboard before they even launched. And what we wanted to do was, how is advertising look in that kind of an environment versus, you know, just buying a banner ad along the side of a magazine article on a website. And really the first thing we did was just full page, beautiful, static print type ads where we could really have branding in a digital sense more than we could in just a click here sense. And then we wanted to move beyond that, where so people are more interested in deeper content experiences in something like a Flipboard. So we actually started to create mini magazines for brands within the Flipboard experience where you could go deeper, and the ad was just sort of the cover page of those deeper experiences. So there starts to become more that we can do from an engagement perspective, from a creative perspective, on tablets than in the traditional web or in those analog environments.
Are you seeing a different change in willingness of people to engage in advertising? I mean, since you were among the first to start putting advertising into a lot of these new platforms, what are some of the early learnings about the kinds of interaction you're seeing on this platform that may be different or the same from what you saw on the web?
Well, one of the things is touch. I mean, it gives us kind of new metrics of how people are interacting. I mean, we early on did an ad that was actually on a mobile device, but it was within an app environment, and the accelerometer became a metric, how long someone actually shook the ad, and that's a different sort of level of engagement than just how many impressions were served or how many clicks you got. So you start to think about things a little bit differently on the different screens and based on the capabilities of the different screens, but one of the things that I think I mentioned is as people are not multitasking as much on tablets, that single purpose offers us less clutter as an advertiser to be in sort of the super cluttered web page environment. There's still heavy reliance on banners in ads because that's how ad networks are serving advertising into the app world, and once you click on those banners, you can kind of be taken into a much deeper, more immersive experience like what the iAd offers. But integrations with the apps directly sometimes allow you to create bigger experiences that maybe don't initiate from a banner.
How about scale? I think one of the questions we all had as we were watching this incredible rise in Mary Meeker's famous statement, this is the fastest growing gadget that we've ever seen. There has still always been the question of is there an upper limit to this? We saw laptops and desktop become ubiquitous. We saw the mobile phone essentially become ubiquitous and smartphones on their way. Do you have a sense as you've watched this evolve of what the upper limit will be for the penetration of this platform? Is it the replacement platform or the replacement interface for what the last decade and a half before it? What do you sense is the upper edge here?
Yeah, well, I mean, the scale is astounding in 22, 23 months or however long we've been in this, and it's only going to grow more. I mean, every indicator and every article you see online now is the replacement of laptops and the cannibalization of laptops, and that's not going to slow down. It's only going to accelerate as price comes down with things like the Kindle Fire and the Nook Color and more competitors that come out. It's a problem mathematically for the print business right now because the scale for magazine distribution on tablets doesn't necessarily justify the increased production costs. So that's something that's got to work itself out, but it will work itself out. So that really the problem that we're having in this moment in time, not necessarily a year from now, is do we take on the increased production costs of these more advanced advertising units when not that many people are going to see it? So that's the balance, and it'll sway the other way soon enough.
Is the fragmentation that you mentioned going to be an increasing issue? I mean, you started by talking about those extra few inches and how much they seem to matter. How, as we start seeing that next generation of Kindle Fires and the 7-inch tablets coming out, does that sort of disrupt a nice trajectory we had of the larger screen that we were able to play with and see higher levels of interaction with? Is that going to be a problem now moving forward?
Yeah, it's a problem. It's a problem on mobile devices. It's a problem on tablets. It's a problem on smart TVs. The sheer volume of app stores from different sources is definitely a problem, and it's a problem for developers in terms of what they're building and how many app stores they can build it for, and it's a problem for advertising from a scale perspective. So that needs to be worked out. There needs to be some universal opportunities to go across platforms and across app stores and across operating systems. But you know, that's one of those things where the technology is there, but the infrastructure in terms of the copyright holders and the people who own the devices and own the operating systems are all fighting a pretty strong battle against each other. So that does need some time to work itself out for us to be able to buy across everything.
John Haber, thank you very
Yeah,
much.
thank you.